These are the most beautiful and exclusive wedges I've ever seen. What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here with my new wedges here. It's really kind of 2.5 wedges here because I took one of them apart to get some more details to share with you. These are by JP Golf, and there is a JP right there, and these are called the JP Premier wedges, and they come in a variety of different styles, but they all generally look like this. Now, JP wedges is actually a fairly new brand to me. I only discovered them last year when I ordered these and have been playing with them exclusively over the last year. Now, I have been playing Callaway wedges for most of my golfing career, and these wedges are absolutely spectacular. Now, there are a few things to love and hate about them, and I want to give you my experiences with these over the last year because they are kind of mind-blowing in many ways. And I'm actually not even that familiar with it, but JP Harrington, I believe the young gentleman's name is, has started this wedge company, and he actually built custom wedges for a number of years, and then actually got brought into the Titleist fold. So as you know, Titleist has Vokey wedges, which are a premium brand of wedges as far as I can tell. And JP wedges were even supposed to be a little bit more niche-y, maybe for the golfer that drives an Aventador or a Bentley Continental, something like that, and really cares about what the look of the wedge is like, but also wants the best technology, no holds barred, money is no object, and these wedges delivered on that because they are not inexpensive. In fact, each one of these wedges, I think, costs more than a typical set of golf clubs, which is kind of crazy, but to be honest, is probably deserved. Now, after about 5 years, JP went on his own again, and he builds in something what he calls the Grindhouse, and I think they're based out of San Diego. Great town, love that town, would love to go back. And as far as I can tell, he does not have wedges for sale all the time. In fact, what I did is I actually was following him on Instagram, and when I saw that he had the store open again, you kind of go in, order your wedges, and the store is only open for a certain amount of time, and then they close it, and then basically what I think they do is they go into that Grindhouse for a month or two and bust out all these wedges, and then do it again maybe a second time that year. So they're not open all the time. These are not something that you can just request at any point, and so you have to be kind of on the ball when you see them available. And I think that he and his team are busy for a couple months, but at this price point, I mean, you bust out a couple thousand of these and you have a pretty good revenue stream. Now, as I mentioned here, even though I only discovered them recently, JP Wedges has obviously been around for a number of years, and the wedges, while they have some stylistic characteristics that have carried over from the early wedges, the Premier Wedge is their latest design, and it's really a multi-piece design. I'm not even sure how many pieces there are. Obviously, you can see kind of the head of the golf club, this back piece, these tungsten weights right here, as well as the metal letters that would go over the opening. But inside here, what you can't see is that there are some additional weights, and I think they might be tungsten. So I think there's a toe weight up here, a bottom weight that goes in there, and then there's actually a cavity in the middle here. So there are at least 6, 7, 8 pieces to each of these wedges. And what's really interesting about these is that you can actually adjust the head weight, because right underneath the decal here there's a little tiny hole, and they put in essentially ball bearings into the head here and then inject epoxy into them to hold them in place. So they can actually make light wedges, medium weight wedges, kind of standard weight wedges, and then heavy wedges. So they can put a lot of those little ball bearings in there and then glue them in. So these are both standard. And then by putting these weights out here by the toe and then the additional weight up here high on the toe, basically that moves the center of gravity to the middle of the face here. I know that the Mizuno ES21 wedges do that, but I actually removed the head off of the shaft here. They come on true temper steel shafts, but you can basically ask for anything you want. And I just wanted to show you that these are generally center balanced. I don't know that this is exactly the center, and basically the way that they insert the ball bearings, I'm not sure that it's always exactly precisely the center, but most wedges don't even have really a center of gravity that you can balance on. But I've kind of found if I just put my finger here, like that, you can see that the wedge balances right on my finger. So that means if you hit basically in that center of the club where you think you want to hit, where most people aim for, that's actually going to be the center of gravity or generally the sweet spot. What most people don't realize is that most wedges, the sweet spot is right down here by the heel. And then for most of us amateur golfers, I've seen some of my shot strikes be right up here. So if the sweet spot is down here, that's a long way away from the sweet spot. But if he puts a sweet spot there and I miss hit it up here, I'm much closer to that sweet spot. So I really like that. Now, the thing that really turned me on to this, and like I said, I was following him for a while, but really the cost of entry on these wedges is really what gave me pause about it. But what really sold me was the way he does camber on these wedges. So what I want to show you here is that he doesn't advertise a certain bounce number, right? Basically, you can get these wedges in mid bounce or high bounce. So what that means is that from the front edge of the wedge to the bottom of the wedge, you'll either have a medium amount of depth or a large amount of depth. Now, this one is a mid bounce, and this one is a 54 degree. It says 54. It's kind of stamped in there and color filled, and you can tell this is a mid bounce by looking at the number of stripes on the hosel here. So if it has 2, it is mid bounce. Now I want to show you on my 60 degree wedge, what we have here are 3 bands, and that means this is a high bounce wedge. Now, to my eye, it's not that easy to tell the difference, but what he says is that basically he talks about camber like this and camber like this. And so what you will notice is that the bottom is just rolled. There aren't really any of those sharp edges that you see some people do, like 3 grinds, a trailing grind, a top grind, and then a leading grind, you know, kind of holding them up to a sanding belt. They are beautifully rolled. They're just really smooth, kind of this organic shape, both on the mid bounce and then also on the high bounce right there. And so you would think that these things would just slide through the ground like butter, and I will tell you what, they do. The bottoms here are pretty polished, and they have this little crosshatch design on them, and so they don't get very dirty, in my opinion. This one I've probably used the most, and this one still is even shinier, and they just really slice through, and when you run your finger over it, it just feels like you're touching like a waxed car. I mean, they're just so smooth, and you can see how they're just so beautiful, right? It kind of looks like it cuts back here, but this is actually just goes right into the heel, and then the dip down here is where there is space for these additional weights, and like I said, they're polished. Now, I ordered these in 2 different color schemes. You can get these in a lot more different color schemes. These are both called scraped finish, which gives them these little zebra stripe-like looks. You can actually get them in the solid color. You can get them in different colors. He has some other patinas. He has some rust finishes. He has tortoiseshell. I mean, you can really customize these. You can get the JP letters in different colors. You can get the tungsten weights in different colors. So you can really customize these. I thought it would be nice to have the blue because I love blue. You can't even see it against my shirt. And I actually thought it would be nice because now I can tell my 60 from my 54 just by looking in the bag, so I don't have to look at the number or read it because I'm a very slow reader. So that's kind of cool. So you definitely don't have to get them matchy-matchy, but you can. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want them to match, you certainly can. And you can get them in the medium bounce, high bounce, and then in whatever loft you want. Now, let me talk about playing these guys because I've been playing them a lot. And one of the things that I was concerned about was getting a wedge in a high bounce, which is forgiving, and for some of us that have steep angles of attack, sometimes I take pretty big divots, especially when the ground is wet. Around here in the Midwest, it can be wet, muddy, hard-packed, dry, desert-like conditions, deep, rough, long, lush grass. You know, you kind of get a bunch of everything. And so for me, I like having the high bounce, but sometimes you'd like almost no bounce on those really tight lies, and I was worried about that because I thought, well, this is going to cut through that long, thick grass around the green and help me flop those shots. I was worried about having this high bounce in like those tight lie, adverse, dry, muddy conditions. And I will tell you what, this worked incredibly well. It might be hard to see here, but on this leading edge, it is almost vertical up and down. It's almost like an airplane wing to me, where the face stops right about here. The leading edge here, while it's curved, it's basically up and down. And so I was worried about that, especially on tight lies, that I might be thinning the shot because the leading edge of this, while sitting on a tight lie on dry ground, might be just too high in the ball and just kind of punch it right past the green. But I will tell you, I didn't really have that problem. And in fact, I tried this on mud and dirt and tight lies. I even went out here at the beginning of the season while the grass has not come in yet. Everything is kind of flat and short, and this wedge still performed amazingly well. In fact, when I hit repeatedly through dry dirt on this, the dirt actually builds up and kind of fills this in. And so what you get is this this leading edge of dirt after repeated shots without cleaning, which you wouldn't do in real life. And then it actually starts looking like a normal wedge to me. It actually looks like there's this sharp edge to it. So it kind of fills in this very flat leading edge, which I thought is funny because it's just kind of showing how much that flat edge helped. And it also shows me how sharp the leading edge is for a lot of wedges. For example, here's my Callaway Mac Daddy cavity back, and this is a 60-degree wedge as well, and this is a wedge that I have really loved. And even though it advertises 12 degrees of bounce, which should be pretty heavy bounce, if I look at the front leading edge of this wedge, it looks so much sharper to me, right? And if I rotate it like this, it really comes to a point. And so if you are like me and you lean this club forward, I actually have almost zero bounce right here, right? The front edge of the wedge is right on the ground, and if my angle of attack is slightly low, I am really kind of digging with a blade into that ground. Now, compare that leading edge to the JP Premier. While this looks very sharp here, again, the front edge right here is basically big, flat leading edge, rounded edge here. So it just doesn't want to dig. It's actually very blunt. It's going to be very forgiving, even on the tightest lies, and that's what I was really worried about. Now, so chipping with this was awesome. In fact, one of the things that I was worried about was moving away from the cavity back wedges. I have used just straight forged wedges before. Cavity backs to me are very forgiving as it puts the weight around the edges here, and I was worried that these might be the same, that off-center hits here would just not be very forgiving, but this worked extremely well. Whatever he's done here works, and I think it's a little bit because the Mizuno solution here was just to put a lot of weight right up here. So to me, it's not as progressive. What I think is in the JP Premier wedge, there's just weight put in more areas. That toe weight, these weights down here, another weight along the bottom there, and then the beads in the middle here. So I think the weight is just a little more uniform throughout the head, and so the off-center hits, I think, are a little more forgiving. So playing with this was exceptional. My chipping has never been better. My pitches have never been better. Flop shots have never been better than with this club. I really loved it, and obviously the looks. Now, there are a few things here that I don't necessarily love, but is probably the natural trade-off with clubs like this. And first of all, for the people that are going to buy these clubs, I think the big one is that most people don't know what JP Premier wedges are or JP Golf is, because it's such an exclusive small club. There are so few people playing them. You know, the production numbers aren't high. These aren't a really popular club. Not popular in that they're not desirable, just popular in that you don't see them. And so sometimes people would comment, man, that's a really beautiful looking wedge. What is it? And I would give them a little story about JP. So a lot of people love the looks of these. They're really intrigued by them, especially when you golf really well with them, when you hit some Phil Mickelson-like shots with them. Yeah, they get people's attention. But when you pay for a club this exclusive, this beautiful, at this price point, I kind of feel like you want people to know what they are. You know, it's kind of like when PXG splashed their logo over everything when they were $700 a club. People knew that. They did a lot of promotion. But JP Golf is kind of a hidden secret in the golf world. Even guys that seem to know wedges haven't really heard of these. So that's one drawback. The other drawback here is that as far as I can tell, JP does not do full face grooves. Now, that hasn't been really a problem for me, but I have noticed that especially when I open up the club face to do a flop shot and I drag through it, my miss hits, or even some of my good hits, are really toe high up here. You know, because now the ball is going to impact along this line here. So if you get it low, it might get into the grooves, but if you get it high in the face, it's going to be somewhere up here, and if you're not super precise, you might be a little bit out here. That's why I really like the full face grooves, because they tend to be a little more forgiving, make sure that you transfer that spin onto the ball. And so I would really love to see full face grooves on the JP wedges, but they have the traditional grooves within the bands here. Not a huge deal, but to me, I like the full face grooves. It also makes, to my eye, the wedge look bigger, and that makes it look a little more forgiving to me too. So it's not just a practicality thing, it's more of a mental thing as well. Now, the last thing I want to tell you is that these things are expensive. And I don't mean just like slightly higher than other wedges, like 20 or 50% more than premium wedges. They are orders of magnitude more expensive than other wedges. And in the base configuration, like this JP Premier wedge that comes on this True Temper shaft here with a Golf Pride grip. This wedge in this configuration is just a little over $630, something like that. And so when I bought this pair, when you throw in tax and shipping, you are at about $1,400 for these wedges. Now, I will say, JP doesn't know who I am, didn't send me these for free. I paid for these out of pocket. Like I said, I was following for so long. My appetite was whetted for these. And so when he opened up the ordering, I went ahead and bought a pair because I wanted to try them out. And they are maybe the most expensive clubs I've ever bought, including drivers. But I think that actually might be a great place to spend money on your game because the short game is so important. If you are not on the green in regulation and you are just off the green 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 yards, a wedge might give you a chance to one putt. I'm talking about a wedge maybe putting you in contention for par even though you might not be on the green in regulation. So the wedge might be the most important club in your bag. Maybe a chipper. But are they the most beautiful clubs I've ever seen? For me, for sure. I mean, even if these clubs stunk in terms of performance, I mean, they're just pretty enough that they might have to go in the bag. But they have a ton of technology. That sweet spot center gravity right in the face. That means that these things are not just for show, they actually work. They are exclusive. So if you are trying to put something in your bag that no one else has seen, if you're trying to be unique, if that's important to you, then these are probably the wedges for you. Am I in the demographic for the golfer that should be playing these? Probably not. If you're a guy driving your Aston Martin Vantage to your exclusive country club, then these are probably the clubs for you. This is what you want to be playing because they're good, exclusive, and beautiful, just like me. Now, money being no object, I would certainly game these all the time. They are absolutely fabulous, and I get giddy just holding them. So, if you want to improve your short game, if you want to get giddy yourself, then you might want to buy some JP Premier wedges. I will say that you can watch JP Golf for when they open up their ordering, or the only other retailer that I have seen that has them in stock new is Second Swing, which is kind of an interesting partnership there. That's not the one I would have expected. But between those two places, you can get these. If you want multiple wedges, you're going to have to decide which kidney you want to keep. But I'll put a link to JP Premier wedges in the description below because they're amazeballs. Peter Von Panda, out.
We can discover more and explore so much deeper.